Good evening, and I'm going to leave you with an interview that my colleague JJ Kioria had with the Principal Secretary, Labor and Skills Development, and the topic of conversation that they had was resolution of labor disputes. From Nairobi, Kenya.
Mwadime, the Principal Secretary in charge of Labor and Skills Development. Thank you very much, PS, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Let's begin with you explaining to us what is the mandate of the State Department for Labor and Skills Development.
Right. The mandate is pretty wide because, as you well know, this is a ministry that has been in existence even before independence. So we deal with all matters labor within the country in terms of ensuring that Kenyan workers work in a safe environment, and therefore we have the Directorate of Occupational Safety and Health, and also to ensure that they are paid what is due to them in terms of the skills that they have, so that, you know, we don't have disguised unemployment in the sense that people have skills that are not utilized to the maximum in the enterprises where they work, and they are not paid also commensurate to the skills that they have. So we have the Labor Commissioner and her team that is in charge of that. We also do labor market research to see where there are gaps, because many a times employers tell us that the kind of graduates we produce do not match their expectations, and therefore the need to continuously do an analysis, you know, in terms of the expectations of the market and the kind of graduates that we produce. Then we also have skills development, which was a fully fledged State Department during the Uhuru administration, but it is a directorate as it is currently in my ministry. Then we have the newest directorate, which is labor migration, owing to the fact that we're looking for opportunities abroad. So it's a very, very wide, you know, mandate that we have as a State Department, taking in consideration all matters concerning Kenyan workers, laborers in Kenya.
We've had teachers and aviation workers threatening to strike. Question is, what is the role of the State Department in terms of dealing with these strikes?
We have done the best that we can. You must appreciate that the economic situation that we are facing currently is very wanting, both for the employers and the employees. You know, we do understand that employees are suffering. Yeah, the situation is not such that they can be comfortable in terms of meeting their needs. But you must remember also, enterprises, you know, have to maximize on profit. Enterprises are established to maximize on profit, and they too have been complaining. Yeah, and you've seen the agitation that has been there over time. So the fiscal space as it is currently is what is causing all this trouble that you see all over. The unions coming up and saying, hey, look, there is need for, you know, their members, their environment that they work in, and also the pay that they receive to become a little bit better. Now, as government, we have tried the best that we can. You saw that the CS, the newly appointed Cabinet Secretary, Dr. Alfred Mutua, had a meeting with the Kenya National Union of Teachers, for example, had a meeting with KUPPET, even had a meeting with the Secretary General Kotu to sit with them and try to convince them that this may not be the right time, really, for Kenyan workers to go on strike. The situation is very wanting for all of us. And you've seen also the agitation by the Gen Zs saying, you know, unemployment is extremely high. They don't want taxes to be increased. And therefore, the role of the ministry is to be a conciliator. Bring together these two warring parties. Make this party understand the situation the way it is for the employees, and here we are talking of the employers, but also make the employees also understand that the situation as it is currently is very wanting. Yeah.
Kenya prides itself that one of its biggest resources is human resource capital. Question is, how well trained is that human resource capital?
The brand that we have of Kenyan labor is superb. I can say that with a lot of confidence. We have young people who are, you know, very well trained, those who graduate from universities, for example, but also those who graduate from TVETs. Kenyans are on high demand in the international labor market. There is no question about it. But is there a need for us to reskill, to upskill? Yes, it's an absolute yes. Why? Because the environment keeps on changing. Yeah? And therefore, as I said earlier on, we continuously conduct market research to see where there are gaps. And indeed, I must confess, many a times our employers in Kenya raise issues concerning the graduates that we are producing, and we address the same with Ministry of Education, because when we conduct research, the recommendations that we come up with inform curriculum. So if there is need for curriculum to be changed to reflect what the employers expect, we do that. We work very closely with Ministry of Education. But the Kenyan brand is highly demanded. I can say that with confidence because we have signed bilateral labor agreements with some foreign countries. The biggest example I can give is UK on medical practitioners or nurses, you know. Kenyan nurses are highly trained and they're on high demand all over. You know, in Europe, Australia, in UK, in Ireland, and the rest of the Western European countries. You know, they regard our nurses very highly. But we have gone a step further as it is. The bilateral labor agreement that we're going to sign with Germany in the next 2 weeks or so, on the 13th of September, actually 3 weeks, will also take into consideration the need for doctors to go and work in Germany. Yeah? They have already done their market analysis of the kind of brand that we have. They came over and did that analysis even before we began negotiations, you know, on the bilateral labor agreement, and realized that we have the experts who can be able to fill in the vacancies that are opening up in Germany. Not only that, IT. Our young people are IT savvy. Extremely IT savvy.
Critics that argue, PS, that jobs should be created locally, and particularly the Gen Z, you've seen them say, we don't want to work outside the country, we want to work in the country.
The unemployment rate in Kenya is extremely high. You know, out of 1 million graduates that we produce every year, and I'm talking of, you know, graduates from primary, graduates from secondary school, graduates from universities, graduates from colleges, our economy is only able to absorb 200,000. And I'm talking of both the public and the private sector. So where will 800,000 end up? On the streets, tarmacking, you know, being idle, and these are active young people. Now, the reality is there are models that we are emulating. There are countries that were at the same level where we are currently about 20, 30 years ago, who experienced the same challenge that we are experiencing currently. South Korea, for example, they sent their young people to Japan, to work in Japan, to work in Saudi Arabia. They came back with technology as it was then, came back with it to the country, you know, and they were able to produce goods of the same quality as where they had migrated to work in.
How are you dealing with errant bureaus?
We don't want young Kenyans to be duped in whichever way. And we have gone out and, you know, spoken very clearly and loudly, actually from the rooftop, that any Kenyan who wants to access a job in the international labor market must go to the NEA website, National Employment Authority, www.neaims.go.ke. That is the National Employment Authority Integrated Management System.
Some of these countries offering these job opportunities, even when confirmed by our envoys or ambassadors, have a record of human rights violations. So much so that if a Kenyan hears there are opportunities in those countries, they would say, no, I'm keeping off because that country has a record of human rights violations. How are you engaging those countries to deal with the record of human rights violations?
We are renegotiating new BLAs, new bilateral labor agreements with some of these countries that are human rights based. So any Kenyan migrating to this country, their interests must be safeguarded through the bilateral labor agreement. The issues of passports being confiscated, the issues of working 7 days a week, for nearly a whole day will be addressed by these BLAs. But we have gone further and deployed labor attaches, Kenyan government workers whose mandate is to ensure that our Kenyan workers abroad, their interests are taken care of. So that Kenyan workers abroad can reach out to these government officers easily in case they find themselves in distressing situations. So we have labor attaches.
Peace, as we wind up, there's a general reliance on yourself and indeed the government to create jobs in the country. What is your promise to Kenyans tonight?
My promise to Kenya is we are doing our very best to ensure that the economy expands within. The economy will expand gradually in terms of the strategies that we have put in place, because these are very, very aggressive strategies. So yes, there are going to be job opportunities going forward. Let me give you an appropriate example. The SME sector, the Juakali, the informal sector, the loans that we are giving out, through the Hustler Fund, the Youth Enterprise Fund, we are trying to encourage these enterprises, small enterprises, to grow and become big enterprises, to be able to employ even more Kenyans. So we are doing our level best. But in the meantime, as we send Kenyans abroad, as they remit that which they are able to get abroad, and they come and invest in our country, gradually with time, maybe in the next 3, 4, 5 years, or at the maximum, we will see an exponential expansion of our economy. Kenyans will be graduating then, will be absorbed within our economy.
Of course, we've been speaking to the Principal Secretary of the State Department for Labor and Skills Development, that is Shadrack Mwadime, who's really highlighted what the ministry is doing to deal, one, with strikes that are impending, and of course, indeed, the bigger responsibility being to create jobs, be it in the country or outside. This is where we put a cap. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a good night.